Hello and welcome to today's event. My name is Roman Tivin. I'm the head of solutions at NIMSI and your host for the next hour or so. So today we will be discussing why internationalization is still important and what gaps and opportunities there are in this area. We're hosting this as a broadcast on LinkedIn, so if you're joining us live, then I invite you to engage directly with us through the comments section. And we will respond to questions or insights from the audience during the live stream. If you've missed the live stream and you're watching the recording, then you can still reach out to us at info@nimsi.com. This event is part of the Global Enterprise Success series. So if this is your first NIMSI event and you're not already following NIMSI Insights, do so to make sure that you're notified in your feed, when we schedule new events. When you follow NIMSI Insights, you'll know where we go live or when recordings are available. And just a quick note, if you're watching this and you're wondering what resources are available, to help with your internationalization questions and strategy, NIMSI has a variety of service packages to help your clients, to help our clients in this area. So that ranges from the strategic level to execution level, to training and also working with development teams. So if you need to level up, your capabilities in internationalization, or if you just don't even know where to begin, reach out to us and we'll help you get started. I think internationalization is about preparing your products and services so they can be adapted to each and every market. Yeah, we're very much aware that every internationalization project is unique. And this is what also Joel Salim pointed out recently in one of his posts. He said that there's a lack of relevant educational materials that kind of guide you and show you how to identify gaps in internationalization and how you find meaningful solutions to them. We also see that a deeper learning is needed in organizations, and they need to understand what it takes to create and also sustain a relevant practice of internationalization, both in enterprise, large organizations, or in startups. So again, if you want to know more, do reach out directly to me. This is roman@nimsi.com, or write to info@nimsi.com. So let's begin. It's an honor and a pleasure to have three internationalization celebrities here, and I'm not exaggerating. So please welcome Frederick, Alexander, and Saurabh. And gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to have this discussion. Clearly, you all have multiple roles, and I think this is typical for internationalization work. So can you introduce yourselves in a few words and tell us what you do today and what excites you about internationalization? So I was going to ask the person with the longest hair to start, but I think let's do this alphabetically. So let's start with Fred.
Okay, thanks, Roman. My name is Fred Fisher, and I'm from London. I've worked in technology for 17 years as a software engineer, product manager, and startup founder. For the last 5 years, I've specialized in international expansion consulting. I have a wide range of experience across many aspects of international expansion, including stakeholder management, software architecture, managing engineering teams, and managing a team of translators. I love working in international expansion because I find the work exciting and I enjoy the surprisingly difficult challenge of working on hard technical problems and hard communication challenges at the same time.
Thanks, Fred. So, Alex?
Thank you, Roman. Hey, everyone. I am Oleksandr Pysaryuk. I also go by Olex, originally from Ukraine, now living in Toronto, Canada. In my recent past, I have built and run localization and internationalization disciplines at several organizations in the areas of telecommunications, HCM or human capital management, and commerce. And I have hands-on experience in building and managing highly technical teams of internationalization developers and technical program managers, and acting as their subject matter expert, product manager, product owner, and delivery manager. Those are titles within that company's specific implementation of Agile methodology. And lastly, thank you, Roman, for referring to us as celebrities. I'd like to pass that credit to the real celebrities, one stellar team of internationalization developers in one of my past companies. And I'll name some names. Monique, Rassam, Michael, David, Brackett, you are the stars of the show. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Saurabh.
Thank you. Thanks for giving the opportunity. I am Saurabh Kautekar. I am dialing in from Bangalore, India. So hello, everyone. And I have 22 years of experience in the globalization industry. I have worked for startups, enterprise companies. I have been in various roles, like I have worked as a linguist, worked as a localization project manager, localization QA engineer, internationalization project and program manager, and recently as director and head of globalization for an enterprise company. So I'm passionate about helping businesses succeed in global marketplace. And I believe that internationalization is essential. It is fundamental for any business that wants to reach a global marketplace and to the global audience. I'm looking forward to really sharing my insights today and to hearing from all of you on this important topic today. So thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the time.
Thank you. Yeah, so question number one. And this is about what has changed in internationalization during the last few years. Yeah, so what do you see as the biggest gaps today in this area? And again, I'd like the three of you to answer this question. So taking the same order maybe would be great.
Sounds good. So I agree with Joel that a real lack of good education and training materials related to software internationalization is available at the moment. Also, once you have good training materials, people are busy. So you need to actually make time available in people's schedules to attend training events. And then after the training events, it's good to find ways to automatically remind people about best practices at the exact moment that they need the information. I've seen some great examples of this at individual companies, and I'd love to see some more general solutions in the future as well. Also, if it's possible to automate an internationalization task, that's always better than writing documentation and training about how to do that task. I'd love to see in organizations investing more in automating internationalization tasks, because this means you need to do a lot less training. The tasks are more likely to be done properly, and it's easier to get everyone across the organization to buy into the international expansion project, because you're not asking people to do as much extra work. And on that point, in general, I'd like to see more attention paid to the social and organizational aspects of successful international expansion. In my experience, there's generally a pretty good understanding of what people like engineers and translators need to do to make international expansion a success. But I feel there's less understanding of how to encourage everyone in every team across the company to buy into the project and to work effectively together to make it happen. Because if people don't work well together and not everyone feels ownership of the project, then the project will be very difficult. People will get exasperated and the project might even fail completely. But if everyone feels like international expansion is a shared goal and everyone works well together across all the different teams, then the international expansion project will be a tremendous success. So I'd love to see more education and training materials about how to encourage everyone at the company to work together to make international expansion a success.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much. All right, Alex.
First of all, I agree with Fred completely. I'll try to go into a somewhat more boring or fundamental area where my observations of the gaps based on my own hands-on experience of building and running teams lie in three areas. These are rather opportunities and not gaps where the added power and expertise in these three areas could create way more long-term value, sustained value, than pure internationalization coding or development. And those areas are product management, project management, and a higher seniority level of internationalization developers, which echoes Joel's comment about training. So growth and upskilling of developers is the third area. Happy to go into each of those areas in detail later in our conversation.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So I think over the past 2 or more decades that I have been observing this part of the industry has come definitely a long way so far. But still, I can see there are a lot of opportunities for improvements, and we see multiple gaps when it comes to ensuring the right level of internationalization applied to the software code. So I believe, and I'm sure Fred and Alex covered it all really very nicely. But in my view, the major gaps are, I would say, lack of awareness. There is no formal training curriculum, as I think Fred mentioned, in the institutions, computer science and engineering curriculum. There is no very well formulated and very well organized information and knowledge available. So the problem is at the root level, I would say. Then there is a lack of awareness at most of the startups or even at the enterprise companies. Nobody knows how to do it properly. And then even if they are aware of it, internationalization is not prioritized. Right level of resources are not allocated. And the worst part is there is lack of empathy towards the cultures across the globe. And many of those product managers or the decision makers in those business units, they think that it is good enough to develop an application for the US market, and they can just sell it globally just like that. So there is no well accepted industry-wide standard framework available right now that can bring a consistent approach towards this area. For example, I am also at the same time as a globalization expert, an expert in project and program management as well. And there is a very well-defined body of knowledge, whether it comes to the waterfall model of methodology of managing it or agile. But it's not the case with internationalization so far. Tools and technology lag, and the speed of overall, as we can see, the speed of overall technology is really fast right now, but we are still lagging from an internationalization technology point of view. AI is taking over, but most of us still really think that see that faulty static code analysis tools are still very prevalent in the internationalization space. And in my recent work, in my recent jobs, I have been with the teams where we have developed AI-based intelligent internationalization systems, which automate almost 90% and save the efforts, most of the efforts in the work. So that's what I would say in terms of gaps.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think it very much resonates with what the others said. So maybe Saurabh, you talked about lack of awareness and also prioritization, and I'm sure you have a much deeper understanding of the different levels of adoption there are. So maybe can you talk a bit more about what organizations need to understand about their current level? How do they learn about where they are?
Sure. So I think very briefly, I would say that every organization has its own unique set of challenges and their own level of internationalization maturity. But if they are convinced that they want to go global, these organizations need to have a framework to identify their current level of internationalization status. And then follow up with step-by-step methodology to reach to their highest maturity state. And this is something that is very well defined, that can be very well defined and very helpful for comparing the current state of affairs and then the desired state of the internationalization maturity if they really wish to achieve it.
Okay, thank you. Maybe over to Tucker, who's in the background. So Tucker, are there questions from the audience yet?
No questions from the audience. Remember, guys, a lot of chatter going on in the comments. I love to see that. Go ahead and network down there in the comments. But yeah, you guys have a golden opportunity with these gentlemen here on stage. So if you have any questions for them, now is your chance to put them in. We'll bring them up on screen and let them respond.
Yeah, and to Olex and Fred, are there any reflections to the previous questions, which is, what do companies need to be able to understand? What do they need to understand their level of internationalization? I even tempted to ask about, let's say, in order to identify some quick wins, if we don't know where we are, what is it we must start looking at?
I think in terms of quick wins, the best thing to do is to look at, well, if we could only internationalize a small number of features, which ones would those be? And that's a question about business value. And I think once you've found those features, then it's a question of auditing the code to see what kind of state it's in. Is it going to be easy or is it going to be really hard? Because in my experience, most of internationalization is really, really easy, can even be completely automated in some cases, which is really cool. But there's a small number of things which end up taking so much time. So if you can find out and predict what those really tricky problems are going to be before you start working, that's really valuable. Maybe you even go back to the product team and say, maybe we don't even have that in the MVP. Maybe we'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
Quick question from the audience. I'll just interrupt here. Sorry to screw up your flow, but a little background here. Jose Palomares from California is saying, I propose we get all of these guys locked in a room writing for a week, and we'll have ready-to-use training materials to inform a generation. And there's a lot of support for that in the comments. So watch your back, guys. You don't want to get abducted here. What is the question, though? Jose asks, what is your take on code scan tools like Lingoport? Is that an investment we should all be looking into making? So kind of, what is your take on these ready-made tools out there that are meant to help with internationalization practices or checking? Which brave soul wants to take that?
Okay, so if I can take it and then maybe others can add to this. So yeah, I think static code analysis tools are, I would say they're good enough, but they are not great. The reason is if the tool that you are referring to, and there could be other tools like that, I'm not blaming a particular tool or a particular brand in the market, but something that I would say is static code analysis tools struggle because you will see a lot of false positives that they throw, and then you will have to have a lot of manual work to really weed out the real issues that it can report, and then there are other manual steps involved into fixing, and then all of that, right? So over, I think, the years that I have been using such tools and then developing further strategy and roadmap for innovation and matured tool set for organizations, enterprise organizations, I have found out that once you have used those tools, identified some of the gaps that they have, and also perhaps if you are maintaining a list of issues that were true positives, false positives, and all of that, right? Keep that database, use it to develop in future certain intelligent tools that can be maybe leverage that data. Or you might want to also look for some open source tools, which will maybe you can go ahead and write your own rules, which will maybe behave more properly as you expect it to do. And then further, in fact, further more mature stages is you might want to really go ahead for. But right now, industry has prevalent static code analysis tools, and it is good to start with them, but I'm sure you need to be aware that they give a lot of false positives, and you need to really struggle with that. So that's where I would leave it.
Thank you. And Alex has raised his hand. So Alex, can you comment on this?
Great question, Jose. And I know Lingaport. Greetings to Lingaport friends. Absolutely useful, those tools are, but you need to know what you're doing, as with everything. And also code scanning, static, or via CI/CD pipeline in the flow of development work works when it's not intrusive and useful. Basically, if your tool allows for that, go for it. You can even try Lingaport Express. I guess there's a free version of that, but you can build your own. I've seen implementations of Own. I've implemented Lingaport, which solved the way over 50% of use cases issues. They're fun to use. You need to know what you're doing with them. You need to know your code base. This goes back to the seniority level of engineers that work on your team that I earlier mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. And also this I think brings us back to the original flow where we talked about what levels there are, and maybe back to you, Saurabh, about, because you talked about adoption and also about it's good enough up until a certain point, like this example of Lingaport. So do you see stages, and what stages there are as you're trying to evolve to a more mature level of internationalization as a discipline?
Yeah. So so basically, the levels. It's a great question, and the levels from the stage of not knowing the importance of internationalization to identifying the need to make a truly global application, and then it involves so many things: hiring the right set of resources and technology, and then bringing in automation, and finally making the best practices repeatable within the organizational ecosystem, right? All these stages are very important. I would really say that some of the important stages are: number one, being aware, the awareness of whether you really are trying to go global, and what is needed to do that, right? To strategizing around it. Then working on discovering, basically we talked about Lingaport, right? So at least you can use such tools to discover if there are any underlying issues with respect to internationalization in the code, right? And then operationalizing the process, develop certain process that can be repeatable, operationalize that process into your organization, and further strive towards further automation of your processes, automation of the work that will save a lot of efforts, and prevent you from a lot of pushbacks because of the manual work and time it takes from the other stakeholders, right? And overall, the final stage is make sure that things are very efficient and are repeatable for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any comments, gentlemen? If not, let's move on. So next question, and I would probably like to ask Alex. So because I remember, Alex, you once said that, and you already talked about it in a bit, that one person can't fix everything. So if we imagine internationalization as a single person, it doesn't work. So what roles does it take to manage this initiative effectively?
Sure. And this is not exactly what I said. I attribute the quote to my mentor in the industry. Hello, Mick. This is a shout out for you. To manage internationalization initiatives more effectively, in addition to, of course, internationalization development, it takes product management of that and project management of that. And I'll go into a bit more detail here. The idea comes, of course, from the realization in practice that not a single developer would be able to solve any company's internationalization issues. No one as a single person is going to make all the code fixes to dozens or hundreds of products, applications, pipelines, roadmaps, tooling suites, frameworks, and so on. The most anyone can hope from one developer persona is having the ability to demonstrate to the various stakeholders what are the opportunities, why they exist, why they need to be addressed, and some high-level examples and code prototypes of approaches to actually fixing things. How does one determine and deliver the value of those fixes and solutions? Well, that takes a solid product manager who speaks the language of value, supported by data, of course. Product managers are essential in communicating the value of internationalization work. They represent the customer. They provide high-level solutions that show to stakeholders what needs to be fixed. Using fixed, the word fixed maybe has a little bit of a negative connotation because it seems that's to imply that something is broken. So we could say in a more technically accurate jargon, what needs to be modernized, refactored, compartmentalized, decoupled, platformized, and all of those things. The actual fixing or refactoring, testing, and release will have to be done by other individual teams, feature teams, with the advice and oversight from the internationalization development team. So worth noting that this will only be possible if internationalization is a priority. So it's the job of a product manager to roadmap, to get the buy-in, and to prioritize. And then project management. Someone will have to manage the timeline, the risks, dependencies, stakeholders, tasks, and most importantly, what do project managers do? They communicate. Communicate over a long span of time, over a life cycle of an initiative. So that's why product management, project management sit as layers in the internationalization teams.
Great. That was. I completely agree with what you said there, Alex. I think it makes a lot of sense. Product management and communication are absolutely central to making international expansion a success. I would add to that, just to go in a bit more detail about, from an engineering perspective, what do you want from the engineers on the international team? You mentioned already that you want very senior engineers, and I completely agree with that, because international engineering is a surprisingly challenging role, because you need to be strong at the big picture architecture and also strong at getting into all the details sometimes as well. And you're mostly working with other people's systems and other people's code, which is much harder than working with code that you wrote yourself. So you need to be a very strong engineer to do the job well. Also, I think it helps as well for the engineers to also be strong at communication, because you need to work with different people every day, all across the company. So you need to be strong at building relationships with people, and you need to get good at getting people to buy into the project. because you're going in there, telling them how to do things, asking them to do stuff. That's much easier if you can communicate why the project benefits the company as a whole, and also how the project can benefit the people that you're speaking with right now. So, for example, if you're talking to some developers about some changes that are needed to their systems so that we can support multiple languages, you could start by asking them, is there any technical debt in the system right now that you would like to fix? For example, are there any things about the system right now that are making it difficult for you to develop new features or things that are breaking? Because if so, restructuring your system to support multiple languages is a great opportunity to fix these other problems at the same time. And the developers will be very happy to have an opportunity to do this. I'd also add, in addition to having, I think I completely agree that on the whole, you really want strong engineers doing this. I would just add a little addition to that, a little small addition is, I've also found that having a junior developer on the team can also be really helpful, because there's a lot of hard tasks with international engineering, but there's also quite a lot of easy repetitive tasks, and those can be great tasks for a junior developer to work on. And if this junior developer can perhaps work directly to assist some of the other teams with implementing some of the easier, more repetitive parts of the project, then again, that'll make it easier to get buy-in from those teams for the project, because you're not just asking them to do things, you're also coming with something to offer to help them. So I think if you have a junior developer who has strong communication skills and loves working with lots of different people, then that can also be a great person to have on the international engineering team.
I think perhaps I would very quickly, I know that Fred and Olex have really added great perspectives to this question, and it's a very interesting question as well. So I'll just take very brief 30-second, maybe an add-on to what they have said. So throughout in my professional experience so far, I have seen that the product managers always need to do a trade-off. I have seen them doing that trade-off between adding whether they should add a new feature to the existing product, or do they want to improve the internationalization quality or the state of internationalization in that application. So for them, the issue is to juggle between the limited resources and the budgets or the whatever funds that they have on the table, where they can get the maximum bang for that buck. But as I think Olex or Fred, they said, is I think we need to keep an eye on the technical debt as well. So in most of the cases, internationalization loses this trade-off battle and gets lower priority, as I have observed in past, unless you have done a great amount of evangelization of those services in many enterprise companies. So, however, it is important to understand that if the issues are resolved in a timely manner and the right level of resources, just like Olex and Fred have said, right level of resources and processes and technologies in place, I believe it doesn't cost huge to maintain internationalization standards for a product.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great you've discussed the different perspectives. We do have one specific question from the audience related to this. Pavel Ryazanov asks regarding roles, can a proper level of cross-team education and raising internationalization awareness across the development department do the job, or is it essential to have dedicated internationalization engineers?
I think it's essential to have dedicated international engineers and to also evangelize across the company and get everybody involved. I think you absolutely need both. If you don't have dedicated international engineers, the project will not happen. It's as simple as that.
My experience is dedicated, hands down. Start with one and see what happens. Just hire the first internationalization engineer. You'll be amazed.
In my view, and definitely, I think once again, Fred and Alex really answered that beautifully. I would further add that it is definitely important to, so both the things are important, right? You need to have the product development engineers, trained, because they don't, you don't want them to introduce the issues in the code in the first place. But at the same time, if they are missing something, and even if they are trained, if they are missing something, it is important, as Fred just said, you need to have the internationalization engineer in maybe a centralized or a distributed environment.
Thank you. Tucker, we do have some comments from the audience. Maybe can you share one or two?
Yeah, let me pull this up. Great conversation. A lot of folks joining from Middlebury Institute. Good to see all of you guys, and Adam as well. Thanks for joining. Along this topic here, we already got to Pavel's question. Thank you for that, Roman. Alex is multitasking, responding to people in the comments. Thanks for that. Lynn says, in the case of high engineer turnover in buyer-side companies, how does the localization product manager or localization team keep the level and quality of product internationalization high while making stakeholder education sustainable for localization? That's a mouthful. Whoever wants to cover that, I'll bring it up on screen here. In the case of I'll do it one more time. In the case of high engineer turnover in buyer-side companies, how does the localization product manager or localization team keep the level of and quality of product internationalization high while making stakeholder education sustainable for localization?
I can take that. Great question. I think part of the answer is in that question. It's the product manager who has the roadmap, believes in it, makes others believe in it, communicates it consistently, and it's just there. There's value. No matter the turnover, the value is not turning over. So keep working on within the roadmap. Do your best with cross-training teams or training new members of the team, but own it as an initiative. Manage it. Product own it.
And I'd add to that this is another reason why automation is really valuable, because the more you can automate things, the easier it is for you to deal with staff turnover.
And at the same time, as I said earlier, right, you also need to have repeatable processes. For example, if you have a training course available for the newcomers, something like a 101 for internationalization, right? That should be always available. Somebody can go and refer to it and keep them up to date. That's what is also important, I would say.
Also, some good comments from Jessica, some advice. Remember, guys, if you guys have something to add to the conversation, it's not just questions. Add your experience as well. We can all learn from it. Jessica Grimm writes, I'd also say onboard designers early about possible pitfalls in their drafts before we even reach development stage. Jose, who's taken over the chat, Jose gets the gold star for most active today, says, Olex, I love your point about having an international team that includes, at the very least, an internationalization product manager. The most senior engineers can get you the influence you need if you can represent the value to the overall product. And those senior engineers usually lack the time and focus to make the larger business case for internationalization. I think there was, and I'll cap this off with a question for you guys. Sorry, we're not getting to all of your questions, Roman. But someone on LinkedIn asked, what kind of data and insights can I use? What kind of data and insights can I use to support hiring decisions of a dedicated internationalization engineer?
All right, maybe I'll give it a shot first and then perhaps others can add. See, there are multiple data points and multiple channels for the data that you might be looking for. One is the first thing is what's the, I think, objective, right? There, what is the strategy of your company? Do you want to go global, right? If there is a startup company just focused on developing an application, and after a couple of years of running it into the market and selling it into market, they want to sell it, I don't know whether they would want to invest into this, although it's always good to invest into internationalization, because the ultimate dream for everyone is to grow, become successful globally, right? So it's always good, but that's what you will have to see first. What is your strategy? Which markets do you want to target? The other data points is if your product is already in multiple international markets, what is the customer feedback? Are you doing well in those markets? Are you growing in different global markets or not? The other data points is even if you are already localizing the product, what is the level of issues that you find later in the cycle of the development, right? So there are a lot of different data points that you can see. I give a few examples that you might want to benefit from.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so there are no more comments to this one. Really good points, good questions. Thank you. Let's move on. I think we've touched on the topic of creating some immediate value for developers. All of you discussed this already, but maybe I have a question to Fred, which is, what's the best immediate value? What is it that can be created for developers more specifically, so they write in a way that's optimal, to localize?
Well, Roman, the most valuable thing you can do for developers is automation. Because if your process for developing multi-language software involves lots of little manual tasks that developers need to do every day, then those little manual tasks are like a hidden tax on productivity every day. And over time, this adds up to a big loss for the company. It's also bad for morale, because developers want to solve hard problems. They don't want to do repetitive tasks. Now, no one likes repetitive tasks, but developers really don't like repetitive tasks, because we know the tasks can be automated, and we know how to automate the tasks. So it feels really wasteful to spend our time on these kind of little things. But if the international engineering team can automate these tasks, that sends a message to every other team in the company that we respect the fact that you are busy and you have lots of other things to do. And we might be asking you to do a few little extra things to support international expansion, but we are doing everything we can to make things as easy for you as we can. And when people realize that the international team is supportive of other teams and that we respect the fact that other people are busy, then it will become much easier to get every team in the company to feel ownership of the international expansion project. Another way the international team can be supportive of developers across the company is to provide clear and engaging training. And the best kind of training is training that's delivered automatically at exactly the moment the developer needs that information. For example, you could have some code that automatically detects common internationalization mistakes and sends an alert to developers who wrote the code, with a link to training material that covers that topic. Or when you need to tell a development team which translatable string keys are going to be used in a feature, then instead of just sending them a list of the string keys, you could send them a link to a website where developers can click a button to copy a snippet of translatable string code, which they can just paste right into their code. This reduces the need for developers to write repetitive code. And you can also include a link to the relevant training materials, which explains why the translatable string code was written in this way. And finally, Another way that we can reduce the need for developers to write repetitive code is to use AI. Right now, my team are using an AI tool called GitHub Copilot, which is similar to ChatGPT, but it writes code. It's really good at essentially finishing your sentences for you, or even writing whole paragraphs for you sometimes. It's a really powerful tool that will enhance the productivity of all the developers in your company across the board. And it's particularly useful for internationalization because we often have to write repetitive code, and GitHub Copilot is really good at automatically writing repetitive code.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Fred. So it looks like there are a lot of opportunities, and it almost looks like there is a lot of innovation opportunities to create a better, fast, and very cost-effective internationalization. We do have space for a few more questions. And one of the questions I'd like to ask is focusing on those who are starting out. Yeah. And let's say they're starting out and they also are aware of what you are talking about, that this is a journey, it's a marathon, and there are stages. So what would you recommend in terms of where and how do I start? You know, I'm running a marathon. It's the first 5 miles I'm running. So, and I don't know what I don't know. What else can I do and how to start?
So I can perhaps take that question. So yeah, I think it's a great analogy, right? It's a marathon. It cannot be like a sprint. It's not a 100-meter sprint. So I think I will just give some perhaps some pointers here. So a few things that are very important are to identify your target markets, as I said earlier, right? Identify the target markets, put together a strategy to prioritize your efforts towards taking your product into those markets, and then tailor your internationalization strategy according to it, and then move ahead with that strategy to get the management buy-in, right? Because you want to go a very long way. You need to have your stakeholders, your sponsors on board with this, and then start early. I think it is very important to really make sure that you understand what your requirements are, what your market needs, your management is aware, and then start really early, right? Don't wait for product from an incubation to a growth and then maturity stage to go to that level. It would be really good to start as early as possible, and then bring in the right tools and technology that really works really well with the rest of the ecosystem that you have at your company. And then the next thing would be to test the code repeatedly and find the bugs. Don't let the technical debt to really pile up. And then overall, adding all this together, make a repeatable process for yourself.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question, Roman?
Yes. Well, you tell me, Tucker, are there questions from audience?
Just one more that I wanted to take a look at here. Let's see if I can yank it up on screen. From Ada Ergun Binen. Do you have any advice on how to create a partnership environment where localization people and the engineers are on the same team working towards the same goal, on the client side, of course, since localization can sometimes be perceived as disruptive to engineering workflows? That is a really good question, so I wanted to make sure that at least one of you guys got to address it.
I can take it. There's so much both teams can do if they are indeed two different teams. Your mileage may vary. You may have one localization team and 20 tribes, air quotes, feature teams or product teams, and they're never your team. You may have internationalization engineers, or they may be under things like platform architecture, accessibility embedded in there. It all depends. I'd say one thing, learn the language of each other first. Learn how engineers speak and think. And to engineers, talk to localizers, learn how they think, their terminology, what they mean by things they say. You'll be surprised at how much you'll learn each way. It's a two-way street, and then build on top of that.
Very quickly, I would also add, and great answer, Alex. I would add to this is, see, you need to identify that both the teams or both the type of functions or roles have their specific responsibilities. You have to work in tandem with each other. You're not working against or you're not working away from each other. Internationalization engineers are ensuring that the code is at a level that you don't find a lot of localization related issues when you're working on the localization part of it. At the same time, if you find any issues, it is important for the internationalization engineer to improve their perhaps scanning processes or tools or whatever, or their methodology, so that such issues are not. So you have to work in tandem, I would say.
And I would just add as well, this is a good reason to have dedicated internationalization engineers rather than just spreading that responsibility out across every individual team, because those engineers are going to be very keenly aware of the importance of this. They work with the localization team every day. And this is another reason why, when you're choosing the people to be internationalization engineers, you want your engineers, yes, they're senior engineers, but also very strong communicators, people who are good at networking and making relationships with other developers across the whole company, and speaking in a way that they will be listened to. And if you do that and you build trust, then that makes everything so much easier.
Thank you. And Alex, I have one more question for you, and again, others to comment if they want to, because one of the things you mentioned with regard to gaps was related to seniority. Yeah. So, can you tell a bit more about your experience when you worked in that team, and what skill levels matter and how it worked for you?
Sure. And I'll start with the opposite. I do not mean that junior engineers are not adding any value. What I mean is rather to be sending a signal today that one needs to invest a lot into growing and promoting engineers. If you have some on your team, expanding their scope, allowing them to go to internal stakeholders and communicate, and expanding their sphere of influence for their bigger impact. Ideally, of course, you have senior staff level engineers who are empowered to have deep technical, high-level technical conversations, who produce technical designs, who prototype solutions, who create proof of concepts, who create and maintain libraries and dependencies, and then inspire other developers to incorporate internationalization best practices, cross it out, requirements into everyday work. A senior developer needs to be versed in all areas of a full stack, preferably backend, as well as DevOps or production engineering or CI/CD, whatever you call that in your organization. I've hired my first engineer as a junior, converted from an intern, and it was a huge success. So I do not mean that seniority level is that much of a gap, and you need immediately to start with senior levels. Grow your engineers, empower them to be influential.
I definitely agree with that, for sure. Absolutely. It's about influence, building influence across the company by working closely together with people and being supportive. And I think ideally, you mentioned earlier, Alex, that you want a product manager who has really good communication skills. I think that's absolutely important. And everyone on the international team, engineers, localization managers, product managers, project managers, it should be your A team of communicators and relationship builders within the company. Because when you create the feeling that the international team is the servant of all the other teams in the company, that's when the magic really happens.
Thank you. So I'd like to And now, speaking to everyone, I'd like to invite you again to reach out to info@nimdzi.com or directly to me, and that's roman@nimdzi.com, to learn more about how you could use the knowledge and the help we give in the area of internationalization. And you can consult with us on strategic and operational levels. The experts here have shared a lot of interesting perspectives and experience. You can also get support when you're trying to manage change, and you can benefit from courses and learning programs and workshops for developers and other roles, including product stakeholders, including localization managers. Also, I'd like to encourage you to check out the stories that we have on our website, which is at nimdzi.com/testimonials. And maybe to wrap up today, we looked at some of the challenges and examples, and also I think we looked into the complexity of what it takes to manage and evolve internationalization as a practice, as a discipline. And in my view, not much has changed. The challenge is still there. There's a lot of great knowledge and material, and also businesses are developing really fast. So this problem needs to be solved. And I think I would like to thank everybody for joining today. And whether it's live or whether you're watching the recording, our panelists made the time to share that experience. So I'd like to invite you, follow them on LinkedIn and stay up to date with what they are doing. Frederick, Alexander, Saurabh, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, a great experience to have you in this session. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you go to the Nimdzi LinkedIn page, click on events, and register for the new upcoming events in this ongoing series. My name's Roman Sivin. It's been my pleasure to be a host today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.